Omagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurnitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So here we are with our Thursday online meeting. There's Ash, just turned on their video. Great to see you. And we do have still a question from last week that was proposed by Mahāprabhu, who isn't here yet, but we can still address his question. And welcome James, who's also just joined us. Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Hope everything is going well. And so the question that we had, unless anyone present has a burning question they'd like to be addressed, we can go to that. If that's the case, I always prefer burning questions.
It'd be nice
Otherwise,
something about Shamananda
sorry,
Prabhu.
what did you say?
It'd be nice to hear something about Shamananda Prabhu.
Oh, is today his disappearance day?
Yes, yeah.
Shamananda Prabhu. I mean, we don't hear so much about him. We hear that he was a part of this trio, right? So today is his disappearance day, is it? Okay, Shamananda Prabhu. So we hear that he is a part of this. We hear a little bit about him, but not too much. But we hear that he was a part of this trio, right? Narottam, Shamananda, and Srinivas, right? And they had Narottam Thakur is probably the most famous amongst that group. And, this is like few generations after, maybe like three generations after Mahaprabhu. And they did very important work in preserving Mahaprabhu's legacy, particularly Narottam, but Srinivas Acharya and Shamananda Prabhu also. And we hear that these three, as young boys, maybe around 15 or something, they all came from different parts of Bengal, I believe. And then they met in Puri, and the three of them together studied under Jiva Goswami. And Jiva Goswami, he was known as the great scholar in our Gaudiya Sampradaya and great philosopher and scholar. So the three of them studied under Jiva Goswami. They also received these titles, Shamananda Prabhu. Nowadays, the word Prabhu is used very loosely, but previously that was a very high title that would only be used in very special, by very special persons. So Shamananda was Prabhu, Srinivas Thakur, and Narottam, no, what is it? Srinivasacharya, sorry, Srinivasacharya, Narottam Thakur. And we hear they studied together under Jiva Goswami in Vrindavan. And then at a certain point, the three of them were given this special delegation to carry some of the writings of the Goswamis to Bengal. Because, nowadays we're quite spoiled with modern, methods of communication. But, back then, you would rely on bullock cart, right, to deliver messages and packages and so on, And so, we hear about the six Goswamis who are in Vrindavan, writing these extraordinary divine literatures. And meanwhile, the Vaishnavas in Bengal, and headed by, as I've heard, Janava Devi, Nityananda Prabhu's consort, they're hearing about these texts and they're very eager to read them also. And so we hear that Jiva Goswami sent these three with a big chest of these books. And the three of them were, they're given this important mission and carried them to Bengal. Then there was that whole escapade when the books were stolen, right? I think most of you have heard of that. When they reached the border of Bengal, then the local king, he calculated that through he had some Jyotish astrologer, and also he had a gang of thieves working on his behalf to calculate, where there was treasure to be stolen. Raj Bir Humbir was the king. And so he calculated that these books were jewels and had his little band steal them, only upon receiving them to discover that they're actually books. And but that king was very pious and understood these must be very sacred books. And anyhow, that was a whole story. And it was Srinivasacharya actually who stayed behind to search and find out what had happened to those books. But Shamananda was involved in that and part of all of that. And Srinivas stayed behind. It was in Vishnupur, I think was the name of the town, to try to find the books. And then and he sent Shamananda Narottam on to continue with preaching, Mahaprabhu's message. And I'm thinking Shamananda might have gone to preach in Orissa, but I'm not 100% sure. There is one very special incident we hear about that Srila Sridhar Maharaj talks about with Shamananda Prabhu that is very significant, that we hear of one very special occasion when I can't remember the details. I wish Suvasini was here. Welcome, Julian. But it was a very, very high incident actually that there was an earring. I don't know if you remember that pastime, Prabhu. I think it was an earring that belonged to Radharani that he came across in Vrindavan, and some of the Sakis actually came to him, and were very grateful that he'd recovered this lost earring, and he actually we're not qualified to discuss these matters, but he actually received, how can you put, like entrance into a higher rasa, right? Shamananda is given as an example because he'd received initiation perhaps into Sakya rasa, the mood of friendship. His guru had initiated him in that way. But through this, because of his own inner mood, and this special mercy he received, he actually received entrance into this higher rasa. And it looks like Divi Sharidi is put in the chat. Ankle bell. That's what I was just thinking. It was an ankle bell. And it was, as I recall, it was actually one of the Sakis actually put like a mark on his forehead with this ankle bell as like a mark of his initiation. So here we are in the chat. Thank you, Divi Sharidi. Srila Sridhar Maharaj tells the story of Shamananda Prabhu finding Srimati Radharani's ankle bell and receiving a special tilak mark, right? They pressed it into his forehead, a special tilak mark on his forehead by the touch of that ankle bell. Srila Sridhar Maharaj explains that Shamananda Prabhu changed from Sakya Rasa to Madhura Rasa by a special dispensation of the Absolute. Thank you, Didi. Yeah, so he is sometimes cited as an example of how, even in that higher plane, everything is still very dynamic, right? And there are cases where someone may be active within one particular rasa, but through their own inner hankering and special grace, then they are given an upgrade, right? We also hear how Lalita Saki, right? She is the right-hand attendant of Srimati Radharani, that she's going out in Vrindavan town canvassing for Radharani's group, right? So there, there's still movement, there's still dynamic movement and change and room for growth, right? So these are very elevated topics. We're not so qualified to go into them. But that is the main history that we hear about in connection with Shamananda Prabhu. All else I can really say about him is that, he's very important Vaishnava in our lineage and did great work, to keep Mahaprabhu's message in this world alive after his departure. from this world. I don't know if anyone else can remember anything about Shyamananda Prabhu that they want to share. But yeah, so we honor him on his day of departure today. Thanks for bringing that up, Nanda Krishna Prabhu. And then the other question, if no one else has anything else to bring up today, this is also going into very high subject matter. But Mahaprabhu had asked about why Mahaprabhu chose Puri, right? It's confusing. This devotee is called Mahaprabhu. He's asking about Mahaprabhu. He's a ISKCON devotee. I met in Portugal just now, actually. His name is Mahaprabhu Nityananda Das. No. So he asked this question about why Mahaprabhu chose Jagannath Puri to spend his last pastimes. And yeah, somehow today we're going into very high subject. We don't usually go so elevated, but it's a very yeah, there's a deep significance behind that, and we have to go back to remembering, what was the original purpose of Mahaprabhu's descent into this world, right? We hear that Mahaprabhu appears. Mostly, he appears as the Yuga avatar, right? He is coming to spread the Yuga Dharma as an avatar Vishnu, spreading the holy name and uplifting the people and so on, spreading the kirtan practice. But then once in a day of Lord Brahma, on a very rare occasion, then he appears as Swayam Bhagavan, Krishna, the original Vrindavan form of Krishna, enriched by the heart and halo of Radharani, right? Mahāprabhu Sri Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahe Anya. No, Radha Bhava Duti Suvolitam, Naumi Krishna Sarupam, right? Krishna enhanced by the heart and halo of Radharani. And so then when Krishna appears in this form, then he has this deeper purpose. On one level, he's also spreading the Yuga Dharma and uplifting the souls, but on a deeper level, he wants to explore what is the heart of Srimati Radharani, right? He's very curious, right? Krishna sees that Radharani is experiencing a level of ecstasy and joy and sweetness within himself that he's not able to access, right? And so he's very curious about this. He wants to explore this, and particularly the mood of Radharani and Vipralamba, when Radharani is experiencing separation from Krishna, experiencing the depths of divine love in separation from Krishna. This is particularly what Krishna wants to explore. And so Mahaprabhu comes as the Patit Pavan avatar, right, to save the fallen souls, but he's also coming with this deeper purpose, right? And so Jagannath Puri is very much connected with that purpose, because this mood of separation, it's actually, intrinsically connected with the Jagannath manifestation, that the form of Jagannath is actually an expression of separation, right? And we hear that because the form of Jagannath is quite curious and even awkward, right? We may respectfully say, right? His big eyes and his squashed form and so on. But we hear that, how did that form come about? It happened first when Krishna's in Dwarka. Srila Sridhar Maharaj gives this very deep explanation. When Krishna at one time was in Dwarka, it's also described in the Brihad Bhagavatamritam. When Krishna is in Dwarka one day, then he overhears some of his wives discussing his Vrindavan pastimes, right? One of his queens who had connection with Vrindavan right? She was sharing with the other queens because they're very curious, right? Because the queens of Dwarka, they're living with Krishna, but they're also seeing that at times his heart is somewhere else, right? That he's always, thinking of Vrindavan, and his heart is always in Vrindavan. So the queens of Dwarka are very curious about Vrindavan, and so they're asking questions and hearing these descriptions about Vrindavan. And Krishna happens to overhear that. They were trying to avoid him hearing, but he heard in the end. And and then Krishna, he's absorbed in his Dwaraka mood. And then suddenly hearing about Vrindavan, it was like a shock to his system. And so he went into this state of extreme ecstasy and became contorted as a result. Srila Sridhar Maharaj said it is like if a train is moving in a one direction at a very high speed and suddenly has to stop, then there will be some transformation, right, within the train. And so Krishna is absorbed in the Dwarka mood and suddenly hearing about Vrindavan, so it was like a shock to his system, and his body took on this odd form. And so this is actually the ontology of Jagannath, you could say, the Jagannath deity. And so this whole mood of separation, it's very much connected with Jagannath and also with Mahaprabhu's purpose in this world to explore that mood of separation. And we also hear, right, that the secret or the significance behind the Ratha Yatra is taking Krishna from Dwarka to Vrindavan, right? That the Jagannath temple represents Dwarka, and then the Gundicha temple represents Vrindavan. And so, that's also, very much connected with Mahaprabhu's pastimes. This mood that, we want to take Krishna back to Vrindavan, right? And there are so many things that are discussed in Chaitanya Charitamrita in this regard. And particularly, there are also particular meetings of Radha and Krishna that are like focal points, you could say, in Mahaprabhu's Leela there. But one of those focal points is the meeting at Kurukshetra, right? And this is all surrounding the spirit, the mood of separation, right? Vipralamba. And one of those focal points is the meeting at Kurukshetra, right? That Radha, Krishna, the gopis, they've been separated for over 100 years, right? And finally, they're meeting again at Kurukshetra at the time of this eclipse. But, rather than, they're expecting to have some alleviation of their pain of separation, but rather it actually reaches its acme point, right? Because the Braja gopis are meeting Krishna, but this is not the Krishna that they knew, right? The sweet Vrindavan Krishna with the flute, the peacock feather, by the Jamuna River and the Vrindavan forest and so on, right? With the deer and the calves. And there was a very particular environment in their meetings previously in Vrindavan. And so when they meet, and Krishna is now coming as this royal princely figure surrounded by, hundreds of queens. He has this grand entourage of elephants and soldiers. There's trumpets and so on. Then the atmosphere is completely different, right? And rather than becoming relieved, their separation actually increases, right? And so this is one of the things that is discussed in Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is one of the moods that Mahaprabhu is absorbed in, particularly during the Ratha Yatra festival. And there are a few other moments as well that Mahaprabhu is exploring. So I would say, this mood of separation, this is connected with Mahaprabhu's staying in Puri in those last years. And we hear that he went through different phases also, right? Mahaprabhu was in this world for 48 years, and first 24 years he lived, as a family man, a grihasta at home. He had his early pastimes in Navadvip. Then at 24, he took sannyas, right, and went to stay in Purī. And and then there were different phases, right? The first 12 years he was traveling and preaching. He was preaching in Puri, meeting with his devotees. He traveled to South India, he traveled to Vrindavan, and so on. And then the last 12 years of his presence in this world, that was particularly when he went deep into this mood of separation, right? That he considered, now I've done my duty, right? I've spread the kirtan movement, spread the holy name, and now I can go into what is really my tasting matter, as Srila Govinda Maharaj said, very sweet expression. What was Mahaprabhu's tasting matter? And so those last 12 years of his pastimes in this world, Mahaprabhu entered into this very deep state of separation, and sometimes very mad, And, everywhere, he saw the ocean, he would think of the Jamuna. He saw a mountain, he would think of Govardhan. Yet the other day we went for a walk on the beach, and I was remembering his pastimes at the ocean, by the ocean in Puri, and sometimes he would disappear in the middle of the night. And he stayed, and you can still see today in Puri, right? We were all there, right? You can still see this very small room and no windows. And at that time, actually, his devotees, they would keep guard over him because it was like he became a danger to his own self. And so they would keep guard over him day and night, but still somehow he would find some way to get out. And so sometimes they would, in the middle of the night, they would discover, oh, he's disappeared. They would go out searching for him. And there was one occasion when a fisherman caught him in his net, and because also when he went into these states of ecstasy, then his body would transform, right? And sometimes he would become contracted like a tortoise. Other times his limbs, they would separate, right? And he would become very elongated. And so in this way, he would look superhuman, let's say, not quite human, and and then, losing consciousness of himself and his environment, and just thinking he's in Vrindavan, right? And seeing Vrindavan everywhere. And so the devotees would have to, keep close watch on him, and sometimes have to search him out, as I said. So these were the last 12 years of Mahaprabhu when he fully just kind of withdrew from the world and stayed in this small room, Gambhira, and just kept his very close companions around him. He actually, even Nityananda Prabhu got sent away. He dismissed, because Nityananda Prabhu, he's in a different rasa, in a different mood of devotion. So he wasn't quite compatible, right, for this phase of Mahaprabhu's pastimes. And so Nityananda Prabhu was sent to preach in Bengal, and he only, Srup Damodar, Ramananda Rai, Gadadhar Pandit, it's a very select group, he kept around him, and they would nourish his moods in different ways, right? Singing songs or reciting verses, that would soothe him or inspire him as appropriate, right? Appropriate to the particular mood that he was experiencing. Gadadhar Pandit, we hear Gadadhar Pandit would chant the verses of Bhagavatam, right? And Gadadhar Pandit, he's seeing the mood that Mahaprabhu is in and crying tears of sympathy, having some sympathetic feeling for what Mahaprabhu is going through, washing away the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a very beautiful verse that Srila Sridhar Maharaj wrote describing that. Actually, it would be nice to, I don't have it memorized. You don't have a copy of Golden Volcano here, do you? I can look it up online as well. Um, let's see, I can look it up. Nilambo Nilambodhi begins like that. Okay, great. We have a book here. Thank you for it's right in the introduction. It's a really extraordinary verse composed by Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Nilamboditate sada swaviraha kshepambitam bandhavam Srimad Bhagavati Katamadiraya Sanjivayam Bhatiya Srimad Bhagavatam Sada Swanayanashu Payanai Pujayan Goswami Prabhudo Gadadhar Vibhurbhuyat Madeka Gati. On the shore of the broad blue ocean, Gadadhar Pandit used to read Srimad Bhagavatam to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is suffering from the great internal pain of separation from himself, swaviraha, right? Separation from himself. Gadadhar Pandit supplied the wine of Krishna Lila to intoxicate his afflicted friend and give him relief. As he read, tears would fall from his eyes like flower offerings onto the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. May the pleasure of that brilliant personality, Gadadhar Pandit, the best of the Goswamis, be my only object in writing this book. It's a pranam mantra to Gadadhar Pandit. So yes, very, very high topics. So Puri, it has, there's connection with Vrindavan, there's connection. It's a very interesting, deep landscape, right? There's Jagannath Puri has association with Vrindavan, association with Dwarka, and also has association with Kurukshetra, right? Because of that mood of separation there. It's also connected with the whole Ratha Yatra Leela. So many very deep moods of divine love are connected with Jagannath Puri. And I'm reminded also of how we hear that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he made that expression that he wanted to spend his last days in Kurukshetra, right? Because we've just been discussing what is the mood of Radha and Krishna, but then one may also ask, well, what is the mood of the devotee, the servitor in such circumstances? The mood of our gurus is that they want to serve Radharani. And so when Srimati Radharani is in this deep mood of separation, she's also in the need of the greatest support, right? And in fact, there's one statement of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur where he says, the goal of our life is to serve the residents of Vrindavan who are suffering in separation since Krishna left. He says that's the goal of our life. If we like square that up with our daily, worries and activities, I think most of us will feel there's a big gap there. What's on our priority list, right? Or what's occupying our headspace, or what we're worried about. And we think what Srila Saraswati Thakur was worried about. How can we give some relief to the residents of Vrindavan who are suffering in separation from Krishna? It's just mind-blowing. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur made this statement, this expression, that he wanted to spend his last days in Kurukshetra. Because his thinking was, service is valuable according to necessity. And so if he could render, one iota of service to Srimati Radharani and the Braja Gopis when they are in their deepest need, then that offering will be the most valuable. Just like if you offer water to someone in the desert, that really means something. Generally, if you offer someone water, it's not considered a very valuable thing. Water is available everywhere. But if someone's in the desert and you offer them a glass of water, that's like life-saving nectar, right? And so this was the consideration of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. If I can render service to them at that time, then it will be worth so much more. And so this was his feeling. Oh, I want to spend my last days in Kurukshetra, when they are at their greatest need of service and support. Right. And Saraswati Thakur, he also made that, following on from that idea, Saraswati Thakur also made that very shocking statement that Vrindavan is for the shallow thinkers, right? Vrindavan is for the hollow thinkers, but Kurukshetra is the real place of bhajam. That was Saraswati Thakur's expression. These are different moods, right? Divine moods that the devotees have. So anyhow, these are all very, very high topics we're getting into today. I might get in trouble, but I hope our gurus will forgive us. Srila Sridhar Maharshi made a comment, like he said, the preachers are happily forced to discuss these higher topics from time to time. We may not be qualified, but sometimes we are forced happily to, but also with some shyness, to discuss them. And obviously, all these things are very high above our current level of realization, but still, we need to have some understanding of what is the goal, what is the end of our line, what is the inner heart of our gurus, what is their high aspiration. And we also need to hear things to increase our own hankering, also increase our own attraction for that higher plane. So there was something else I wanted to say too in regards to that question, but I can't remember now about Jagannath Puri. But there was another thing I was thinking to add as well. Somebody asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj, what is actually the most superior place, like of all the pastime places of Mahaprabhu, what is the best place, right? Because there's also the Navadvip Leela, right? But then we hear Puri, Jagannath Puri is connected with all of these very high divine sentiments, and someone asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj this question, and he said that that yes, the Leela in Puri is very, very high. And he said, however, the very exclusive devotees of Mahaprabhu, they will still prefer the Navadvip Leela. That was what he said. They will still prefer the Navadvip Leela with Mahaprabhu. And we also hear Bhaktivinoda Thakur expressing that sentiment in some of his poetry, because it is actually very painful for the close, intimate associates of Mahaprabhu to see him take sannyas, right? Nowadays, you see like they're making some deities of Mahaprabhu in sannyas. In Vrindavan, you see many. But actually, Gurudev mentioned previously, you would never see that, because it's actually disrespecting the feelings of the Navadvip Bhaktas. And so that's why on our altars, we worship Mahaprabhu in his pre-sannyas form, right? In his beautiful, youthful form with long hair and shining dress and so on, right? Because for the devotees of Navadvip, for Mahaprabhu's associates in Navadvip, it was a tragedy, right? And Srila Sridhar Maharaj, we have that chapter, right, in Golden Volcano, a tragedy of separation. It was a tragic thing. For us, it's something to celebrate, actually, for the conditioned souls. Oh, Mahaprabhu took sannyas to save all of us, right? He took up the order of renunciation for our sake, And so for us, it is a happy thing. And you see in some missions, they celebrate that day, the day of Mahaprabhu's sannyas. I think that's probably the norm amongst Gaudiya missions. But in our mat, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he established that at the time of Mahaprabhu's sannyas every year, there would be a 3-day period of fasting, and sober contemplation and simplifying our life. And it was a time, to reflect and try to give up our worldly enjoyment and so on. It was a sober time. And when I lived in Navadvip, still every year that went on for these 3 days. Because Srila Sridhar Maharaj, it was his own feeling, as the exalted soul that he was, but he was also honoring the feeling of the associates of Mahaprabhu at that time. It was devastating, when Mahaprabhu left, and had his beautiful hair shorn off and took up this austere dress of a sannyasi, cut off connection from his beloved wife and mother and so on. It was devastating for all of them. And so they prefer to remember that period before, right? When they had their beautiful Sankirtan together, gatherings and Shiva Sangam and so on, right? And there's some beautiful poetry that Bhaktivinoda Thakur composed, feeling himself to be a member of that group, the Navadvip Bhaktas, saying, "Oh, I don't like to see the sannyas form of Mahaprabhu, but I want to see that beautiful form of Mahaprabhu with his curling hair and silken dress and so on." That's a very beautiful poetry. Let me see if it's in Navadvip Bhava Taranga, published as a part of Navadvip Dhām Mahatmya. Let me see if I can. You probably don't have a copy here. The temple probably, but I'll find it here. Amichai. Here it is. I found it here, I think. This is it. So it's Navadvip Bhavataranga. Amichai Gaur Chanje Loite Maya Pode Jatai Kaishur Vesh Shri Angete Spode Yatai Chachar Ke Shri Kachava Sane Isho Dhyane Lila Kode Bhakta Jana Sane. I want to bring Gaur Chandra back to Mayapur, where his youthful dress shines on his divine. So I want to bring him back, right? And this is actually, this brings in a whole other subject, why we don't do Rath Yatra in Navadvip or Mayapur, why we should not. Right? It's a very there's a very deep point connected to this, that Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he made this point that we can do Rath Yatra anywhere in the world, but we cannot do it in Vrindavan or in Navadvip, because Navadvip is considered non-different from Vrindavan. Why? Because from Vrindavan, where will you take him? The whole point of Rath Yatra is you want to bring him to Vrindavan. So you can't do Rath Yatra in Vrindavan or Navadvip, because from Vrindavan, where will you take him? It will be very disturbing to the mood of the associates, of the close associates of Krishna Mahaprabhu. So I like this example very much, because it's a clear demonstration of why we have to practice our spiritual life under some guidance, right? Because otherwise, in a stereotypical way, we can go on with our practice, right? We can go on through the motions, but we have to learn to be sensitive to the feelings of the higher devotees, right? We don't want to cause disturbance within that higher plane, right? So otherwise what we're doing is just like a ritual, which will give us some good karma, but we want to move with some sensitivity for the feelings of the higher devotees. Because what we may be doing as a ritual, it actually has some very deep significance based on principles of love for the higher devotees, right? So we want to try and connect with that plane, at least in a theoretical level, right? And not to disturb them, try to honor their feelings. I mean, so much of our spiritual life, it's about honoring the feelings of the higher devotees, right? And there's a tendency for us to take things from that higher plane and turn them into, rituals and mechanical movements. And we have to remember from time to time that all of these practices that we do, they're actually based on ecstatic feelings in the hearts of the devotees, right? It's like with chanting our japa is a very simple example. We may do that as a daily ritual. Oh, I got to chant my however many rounds, right, at this time every day, and we get through it. Sometimes it's like that, right? But for the higher devotees, taking the name, that's an ecstatic thing, and they probably won't even get through more than one name because they're in too much ecstasy, right? So it's something that we want to remember from time to time, right? Connect to what is the actual origin of all these practices that we do. So anyhow, this example of Rathayatra, this point Srila Sridhar Maharaj made, it's a very good example of that, why we need to inform our practical life of devotion, practicing devotion. We have to inform that by hearing the sentiments, the feelings of the higher devotees. So, so let me go back to this verse. This is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I want to bring Gaur Chandra back to Mayapur, where his youthful dress shines on his divine form, where with his wavy hair and dhoti tucked in 3 places, he performs pastimes at Ishodhyan with his devotees. Ishodhyan, it is, I think it means something like the garden. That's right. Yeah, it's here in the word. The Lord's garden means it was in place in Mayapur. Now there's a temple, there's a Gaudiya Math there. So this is the beautiful expression of Bhakti. I mean, he's longing for that form of Mahaprabhu before he took sannyas. I'm just looking at the previous verse here. Seeing the golden luster of the Lord's sannyasi form, he's envisioning, because after Mahaprabhu took sannyas, generally the sannyasis, they're not supposed to return to their birthplace, but there's some allowance that they can go once after 5 years, something like that. And so Mahaprabhu, after 5 years of taking sannyas, he did go back to Navadvip once. And at that time, because, when Mahaprabhu left, he, there he was, one of the gang in a sense, right? He was a family man, he was a Sanskrit pundit and so on. He was a respected person, but he's an ordinary person in one sense from many people's perspective. He also had some persons who were anti to him because they didn't like the message of pure devotion that he was starting to spread. Then he suddenly took sannyas, which captures everyone's respect and attention, travels around India, making him fairly famous. And so then when he returns to Navadvip, like you could take as an equivalent someone who leaves their small country town, goes to Hollywood and becomes a big star, right? Then if they come back to their hometown, imagine, how much attention would come, so something like that, So then Mahaprabhu returns to Navadvip, and the crowds were mad, you know. Thousands and thousands of people were following him and gathering around him, to the point that in some places it was hard to find a place to stand. We hear that when he went to Vidyanagar area, there are descriptions in Chaitanya Bhagavat, I believe, the Ganges. People were, because there wasn't enough space on the land, people were standing in the Ganges. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj gives that beautiful description in Golden Volcano, saying the Ganges was full of human heads, like as far as the eye could see. People were climbing trees and standing on branches to get a glimpse of him. And Mahaprabhu had to go stand on the rooftop of the devotee's house where he was staying. Vachaspati, something's Vachaspati. He was staying with it. He had to climb onto the roofs because the crowds were too much. And then he actually had to leave because it was too much. And he went to where Armat is now in Kulia Gram, as it was known at that time, or Aparad Banjan Pat, as it also became known. So he went to that area. He had to like escape the crowds, right? And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur is envisioning himself as a member of that crowd and seeing Mahaprabhu standing on this rooftop in this effulgent, saffron dress and feeling this heartbreak within him. Oh, I don't want to see this form of my Lord. I want to see that beautiful form before. So seeing the golden luster of the Lord's sannyasi form, I will fall to the ground and longingly gaze at him like the gopis who cried, remembering the Jamuna upon seeing Sri Krishna of Dwarka in the garb of a king. So just like the gopis seeing Krishna in Kurukshetra in this Dwaraka mood, they're feeling this heartbreak. He's similarly feeling like this, seeing Mahaprabhu in his sannyas form. So there's also that link here. So yes, this is the deep feeling in the hearts of our gurus. When will I stand on the bank of the Ganga and behold the glory of the Lord at the door of Vidyavachaspati? That was the name of that devotee where he stayed. When will the Lord, the leader of the sannyasis, mercifully appear before my eyes atop the roof of Vidyavachaspati's home? Okay. And in fact, this is another very interesting point that Srila Sridhar Maharaj commented that if you are going to do a Rath Yatra in Navadvip, you can do it from that area, taking him to Mayapur. He said that that would be appropriate. From that area, I think it's Vidyanagar area, that place where Mahaprabhu went after 5 years, that island, that area within Navadvip, take him from there to Mayapur. Srila Sridhar said you could do a Rath Yatra like that. But to take him from Mayapur to anywhere else, that would be inappropriate. So I don't know if it's ever been done, but Srila Sridhar he said that would be ontologically correct, That would be appropriate and respectful to the sentiments of the associates of Mahaprabhu. Okay, well. Jai Bhagavan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki Jai, Shri Navadvip Leela ki Jai, Shri Puri Jagannath Puri Leela ki Jai. And all the parshads of Mahaprabhu Jai. Well, we still have a few minutes left. Welcome Axel, who also joined, and Sadhvi, who also joined. Don't know if anyone here wants to share any thoughts, comments, or a question before we end for today. There's Krishna Keshava Prabhu also joined us. Welcome,
Hi,
Prabhu.
Bob. Thank you.
Dandavat. Any thoughts, Vijay Prabhu? Well, I'm here in Ireland, and always very enlivening to come here and see our community in Limerick. We're having an evening program tonight. We had one also Tuesday, and we're having morning programs, and it's always very inspiring. Always there, Somya Sham and Vijayananda, they're always expanding the service, increasing they work full time, and they also manage to travel a lot and visit many of our communities around the world. But in their spare time, they also run a temple. somehow. And every morning before work, they go to the temple and they're also expanding. They're building an extension, so there will be a bigger temple space. And yeah, and then they have evening programs twice or is a week, is it? Or three times a week? Twice a week. They do bigger evening programs, and every morning they have program. Plus a Kaddishi, they have special Kaddishi program as well every 2 weeks. And then very, very nice community and always some new faces, always coming for the programs and some very steady who've been coming like, how many years is it now? At least 10 years, more than 10 years. Yeah, some of the group here, they've been coming more than 10 years. So it's really quite something. I used to joke, there must be something in the water in Limerick. Because some of the devotees who come, they just look like so conservative and, not people you would expect, someone you might meet down the pub, like some of them look like that, just very, Irish or, very conservative. Ireland is still surprisingly conservative. That's another thing. And it's slowly improving. But I remember when I first started coming, which is maybe 12 years ago or something, or 10 years ago, many of the group, they would lie to their family and tell them they're going to the gym or something like that. They'd hide their neck beads and they had this whole like secret double life going on, and they just couldn't tell their family. It's still like that in some cases, but maybe a little better than it was. Yeah, Ireland is still surprisingly conservative. So that makes it all the more impressive that you're running the temple here. Yeah. Anything you want to share about your service here?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Uh,
So Matsya has a question.
Kind of regarding that reaction, would
Hmm.
you have to share the importance or the significance of the Snan Yatra?
Snan Yatra, that's the bathing, right? And that took place recently, I think.
Yesterday. Day before yesterday.
I think yesterday.
Day before yesterday.
Day before yesterday. Okay.
Yes.
The Snan Yatra. Well, I can't say with so much authority, but as I recall, there's a Leela that Mahaprabhu, he gets sick, doesn't he? He bathes, right? He gets a fever, yeah. Right. Because then they close. What happens is, so Prabhu is asking about this Snan Yatra festival. Snan means bathing. It was yesterday. And so it happens every year during the hot season that they have this special bathing ceremony of Jagannath. And then he becomes, oh, Gangalit is asking to show us the temple. We're not actually at the temple now. We're at the extension of the temple, which is their home. And after this meeting, then we'll go to the temple. But I'll take some pictures and I'll share them in our group. So then after the bathing ceremony, Jagannath becomes sick, right? And then there's another period, it's called Anavasar, is it? When Mahaprabhu, you can't have darshan for like, is it 2 weeks? 15 days. Anavasar means something like, cannot be seen, right? And so Jagannath withdraws for these 15 days or so because he is sick, right? And then afterwards he again gives his darshan, and then is the Rath Yatra right after that. So what is the significance? I mean, I would say, based on my understanding, that it is simply the Lord's Leela. He's playing. The Lord is playing with his devotees, right? And you see how Mahaprabhu, it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, you mentioned when this takes place and Jagannath becomes closed, then Mahaprabhu becomes very upset, very disturbed, and he actually leaves Jagannath Puri because he can't bear to be there and not have the darshan of Jagannath, because it's his daily practice, right? Every morning he goes for the Mangal Arati, and then he starts his day, right? And so then Mahaprabhu goes into this mood of separation because he cannot see Jagannath. So I would say that, and he, to the point where he has to leave Jagannath Puri, he can't bear to be there. So I would say it is part of the Lord's Leela, and our Gurudev actually mentioned that in regards to, because, we, as Westerners, we are not allowed to enter, right? And we can complain and we can blame it on the pandas and so on. But our Gurudev mentioned, actually, this is Jagannath's play, that we cannot see him. It is his play. And it's actually, it is increasing our desire, right? Because there's some block there, there's some obstacle, and it's actually increasing our hankering, And we were all in Puri last year with Vijay, Somya Sham, and Ananda Krishna was there, and I remember I had this, it was more or less my first visit to Jagannath Puri, actually, and I remember this moment that I had when we were standing in front of the Jagannath temple, and it like kind of just hit me like, wow, this is so wonderful, like we're all standing at the gate, like, oh, Jagannath, we want to have your darshan, but we can't, And I thought, wow, this is actually makes everything much more interesting, like I felt like we were like groupies, like, oh, we want to see our favorite star, but we can't have entrance, and we're like, I love you, Jagannath, I'm here. Like, yeah, you want your autograph, And I thought actually this makes the story much more interesting, and
wanting, needing.
yes, yeah, it awakens that desire more within our heart, and Jagannath can see us, right? He sees us. He also wants to see us, right?
Darshan is when Lord need to see us.
What did you say?
Darshan, when you say when we go for darshan, so
Hmm.
Lord,
We want to be seen.
need to be seen.
Yeah, we want to
That
be
means
seen.
the Lord.
Right. Yeah, that's another thing. It's helping. That's a good point. That whole situation is actually making us go deeper into what darshan actually means, right? Not to see, but to be seen, right? And so we have to go deeper into that conception. It's not such a cheap thing to have darshan. Right? What can we actually see with our eyes? But ultimately, we want to be seen. Right? We want him to see us and purify us and uplift us by his divine glance, right? That is actually what darshan is. And because we can't go in, we're not taking it lightly, right? We're really feeling that, wow, we can't go in, and then we're really feeling that. And I'm reminded too of we hear of one incident with Srila Saraswati Thakur when he was, because Saraswati Thakur was born in Puri, right? That's another very interesting point. Srila Mahaprabhu departed into the world from Puri, and Saraswati Thakur was born in Puri. Srila Sridhar Maharaj has a very beautiful poem describing this. But anyhow, yeah, so we hear of this one incident when Saraswati Thakur, he was giving some talk, like sitting out on the veranda at the temple. He was giving some talk, and then the time came, and you can see that Gaudiya Math, it's just down the road, right, from the Jagannath temple. And so Saraswati Thakur was giving this talk, and then the time came for the evening arati for Lord Jagannath. And there was one disciple in the group who, gave his obeisance and got up and left and went for the arati, right? And then he missed out on some serious harikatha, right? Then he came back, and Saraswati Thakur asked him, did you have darshan? Right? Did you have darshan? And he said to him, if you I'm not sure if he said it at that time or if he later spoke on this, but Sarsi Thakur explained if you had real darshan, you wouldn't be able to leave. You know, like we hear Mahaprabhu, when Mahaprabhu went to Jagannath in front of Lord Jagannath, sometimes he would faint and go into these deep states of ecstasy and he'd have to be carried out, right? There are some incidents like that, you know. So Sarsi Thakur made this point, you know, if you, that's right, I think he said eye exercise, right? Did you have some nice eye exercise? It was one of his expressions, you know, because if you actually had real darshan, you know, you wouldn't be able to come back like that. You know. Now, actually, so many of the things that we do, you know, chanting, going to arti, honoring prasad, if we actually performed one of them, that's it, we'd be out. If we could honor like one morsel of Mahaprasad, we'd just be in ecstasy. We wouldn't be able to eat. We just take one grain of rice. And then that'd be it. It's over. You know, we can't eat anymore. You know? So yeah, something to think about. You know, and like, you know, the prasadam, the Mahaprasade Govinde, and these Sharira Vijita, these prayers that we sing, if we really think about the meaning of those songs, you know, wouldn't be able to eat actually. You know, there's such depth, such profundity in every little aspect of what we do. So yes, I would say the Snan Yatra is part of the Lord's Leela to bring his devotees closer, right? Closer to his heart. And this whole principle of separation is actually very important, you know, in our Siddhanta, you know, and our gurus have explained that ultimately Vipralamba, separation, is the highest conception. And the greatest closeness is actually to be found in separation. And so it's an important aspect of our Siddhanta. And this is also part of the reason why Mahaprabhu, although it was painful, why he left Navadvip, apparently abandoning his devotees, because he's plunging them into the depths of separation and touching their heart so much deeper. Right? So it's also an important aspect of our Siddhanta. Okay, well, we're just about over our time. Any last comments from anyone? Should we close there? Darya, Leela, anything you want to share with our group?
Just really happy to be around you.
Darya Leela is from Ukraine, as we mentioned. She was at our Villa Govinda ashram for a few years. Say hello.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat.
Yeah, she was serving at our temple in Italy for several years, and now
just 1.5.
1.5
Yeah.
years. Okay, several years.
Yeah,
More than
it
1
was
year.
amazing, and time is different at
That's
the Holy
true.
Dhām, so
It's true. It felt like you were there for many years.
Yeah, I also thought that
Okay, and now she has shelter in Ireland. Okay, so we'll close there for today. Always very joyful to be in your good company.
What's the girl from Ukraine's name again?
Oh, Darya Leela. That's a whole other talk.
Darya
Darya
Leela.
Leela. It is a name for Mahaprabhu's Leela, actually. Right? All
Darya.
Darya, right? It is referring to that spirit of magnanimity, right? The mood of distribution, right? So that's a very nice topic, actually. Maybe next week we can talk about that. Okay. Divya Sharadidi, any words you'd like to share with our group today?
Speechless. That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
I'm honored.
Speechless.
Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govindadev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. All these devotees, sincere seekers ki Jai. Shri Hari Nam Sankirtan.
Jai.
Jai. Nitai
Jai.
Premanande. Haribol.
Haribol. Dandavat pranams to all the devotees there with you and all the
Dandavat.
Harival.
Jai. Jai Nanda Krishna.
Bye.
See you all
Dandavat.
next time.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Vivo.